The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the distant hum of a lawnmower blended with the soft chatter of birds perched on telephone wires. It was one of those evenings that felt timeless, calm, predictable, safe. Lena adjusted the rearview mirror as she pulled into the driveway of her childhood home. The house looked exactly as it had when she was a kid, white paneling slightly weathered from years of harsh summers and cold winters, a porch swing that creaked even when no one was sitting on it, and the ever-present wind chime that tinkled in the evening breeze. She hadn't lived here in years, but every detail still felt ingrained in her bones. She grabbed her overnight bag from the passenger seat and stepped out. The pavement was warm under her feet, still holding onto the heat of the day. A single porch light flickered above the front door as if adjusting to the coming night. "Mom," she called as she stepped inside, the screen door groaning on its hinges before slamming shut behind her. In the kitchen came the familiar voice, warm and light, carrying the same comforting tone Lena had grown up with. She made her way through the hallway, trailing her fingers along the old wooden banister as she passed the staircase. The house had a smell that never changed, a mix of lavender, coffee, and something faintly metallic that she could never quite place. It was a scent that instantly transported her back to childhood, to school mornings and rainy Sundays, to nights spent whispering under blankets with her best friend, Diddy. Diddy. It had been years since she thought about him. As she stepped into the kitchen, her mother was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like rosemary and garlic. The old radio on the counter played a soft, jazzy tune, blending seamlessly with the rhythmic scrape of a wooden spoon against the pot. "How was the drive?" her mother asked, glancing up briefly before returning her focus to dinner. "Not bad. Just long." Lena dropped her bag by the door and leaned against the counter. "It's weird being back. Everything looks the same, but it feels, I don't know, smaller?" Her mother chuckled. "That's just you getting older. The world doesn't shrink, you just grow." Lena smiled, but something about the words sat strangely with her. She let it go. As they ate dinner, the conversation drifted from work to family gossip to little updates about the neighborhood. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing strange. Nothing unusual. Just the kind of quiet, familiar comfort that made her feel like she was 16 again, sneaking in late and pretending she hadn't been out with Diddy past curfew. After helping clean up, she retreated upstairs to her old bedroom. It was exactly as she had left it, same floral wallpaper, same wooden desk covered in old scribbled notebooks, same bookshelf filled with titles she had long outgrown but couldn't bear to part with. She ran a hand along the spines of the books, feeling the dust collect on her fingertips. Her gaze drifted toward the small corkboard on the wall, cluttered with old photos and postcards. And there, in the center, was a picture of her and Diddy, arms slung around each other, grinning at the camera. She hesitated before reaching up and unpinning it. The edges were frayed, the colors slightly faded, but the memory was still sharp. Diddy had been her best friend. The kind of friend who made childhood feel infinite, who turned empty lots into pirate ships and summer nights into grand adventures. He had been the one to push her to climb higher, to run faster, to dream bigger. And then, one summer, he was gone. She never talked about it. Not really. Lena exhaled slowly and set the picture down on the desk. It was late. She was tired. Slipping into bed, she let the familiar weight of the blanket settle over her. The night air was thick with cicada songs, and the ceiling fan hummed softly overhead. Her eyes drifted shut. Outside, the wind picked up. The porch swing rocked ever so slightly, creaking in the darkness. And in the hallway, just past her bedroom door, the old wooden floor let out a single, quiet groan. Lena woke to the soft gray light of morning filtering through her old lace curtains. For a moment, she lay still, letting the quiet settle around her. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain, though the sky outside showed no signs of an early storm. It took a few seconds for her to remember where she was, to register the familiar creak of the house, the slightly lumpy mattress, the distant hum of a radio playing downstairs. She stretched, her fingers grazing the nightstand. The photograph of her and Diddy lay where she had left it, the edges curling slightly from years of being pinned to the corkboard. She traced the outline of their faces with her thumb before setting it back down. Downstairs, the kitchen was already alive with the smell of coffee and toast. Her mother stood by the sink, humming softly as she rinsed out a mug. "Morning," Lena said, her voice still thick with sleep. "Morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" "Yeah, I think so." She hesitated before pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. "I forgot how quiet it gets here at night. I kept thinking I heard something, but I guess it was just the house settling." Her mother smiled knowingly. "You always used to say that when you were little. Every creak and groan had you convinced something was moving around out there." Lena huffed a small laugh, taking the cup of coffee her mother placed in front of her. "Guess some things never change." The morning moved slowly, in the way mornings often did in small towns. Lena found herself slipping into old habits, folding the kitchen towels the way her mother liked them, rinsing her cup in the sink without thinking, leaning against the counter while the radio played low in the background. By mid-morning, she stepped outside, drawn by the pull of nostalgia more than anything else. The front yard looked almost untouched by time. The same cracked pavement, the same overgrown hydrangea bushes, the same warped wooden fence that lined the property. Across the street, the neighbor's house still had the same peeling blue shutters. She walked without a clear destination, letting her feet carry her down familiar sidewalks. The town was just as she remembered, small, unhurried, as if it had been preserved in time. The same bakery with the hand-painted sign, the same gas station that never seemed busy, the same park where she and Dee used to ride their bikes until the streetlights flickered on. She paused when she reached the edge of the park, her eyes instinctively finding the old wooden pavilion near the swings. It was where they used to meet, long before cell phones and schedules, when summer days stretched endlessly ahead. For a moment, she almost expected to see him there, waiting, like he always did. But the pavilion was empty, just as it had been for years. Lena exhaled and turned back toward home, shaking off the strange weight that had settled in her chest. Maybe coming back after all this time was making her nostalgic. Maybe she had just been away for too long. By the time she got back, the sun was higher, casting warm patches of light through the trees. The house looked smaller in the daylight, more ordinary. Just a house. Just a town. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about it all felt different. She just couldn't quite put her finger on why. That evening, the wind picked up again, rattling the porch swing and making the chimes outside her window murmur softly. Lena sat at the kitchen table, flipping through an old photo album her mother had pulled from the hall closet. The plastic sleeves were slightly yellowed, the corners of the photographs curling with age. "You used to spend so much time out there," her mother mused, nodding toward the page Lena had stopped on. It was a picture of the park, taken from a distance, one of those casual snapshots where the subject didn't know they were being photographed. She and Diddy were in the background, perched on the edge of the pavilion, their backs turned to the camera. "Yeah," Lena murmured, tracing the grainy outline of their figures with her finger. "We were always out there." Her mother didn't respond right away. She was looking at the picture too, but with a slightly furrowed brow, her lips pressed together in quiet thought. Lena glanced up. "What?" Her mother blinked, her expression smoothing. "Oh, nothing. I just..." She shook her head and smiled, though there was something distant in it. "It's funny how memories fade, isn't it?" Lena didn't press, but the moment stayed with her. Later that night, after her mother had gone to bed, she found herself back in her childhood room, sitting at the desk with the same photograph of her and Diddy she had taken down the night before. The house was quiet, save for the occasional shift of the floorboards as they adjusted to the cooling night air. She stared at the picture. There was something about it that unsettled her. It wasn't obvious at first, it was just a childhood snapshot, nothing strange. But the longer she looked, the more something felt off. The way Diddy's posture seemed stiff, like he had been caught mid-movement. The way her own face was turned just enough that her expression was unreadable. The background, slightly out of focus, but with a strange sense of depth, like the trees stretched farther than they should have. Lena shook her head, setting the photo down with a quiet exhale. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe coming home after so long was making her mind play tricks on her. Nostalgia had a way of warping things, she knew that. Still, when she turned off the light and climbed into bed, she found herself glancing once more at the photograph on the desk. And in the quiet stillness of the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something within it was watching her back. Lena woke before dawn, the kind of waking where she wasn't sure if she had been dreaming or if something had pulled her out of sleep. The house was silent, save for the slow tick of the clock on her wall and the faint rustling of trees outside. Her room was still, untouched from the night before, but she felt the slightest shift in the air, like the quiet wasn't just quiet, but expected. She exhaled and rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket closer. It was probably nothing. Old houses made noises. Shadows stretched differently at night. Nostalgia had a way of distorting the edges of things, making the familiar feel unfamiliar. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. She didn't move for a while, staring at the dim outline of the desk across the room. The photograph was still there, exactly where she had left it. But something about it seemed different in the pale light, though she couldn't put her finger on why. After a few more minutes of trying to convince herself it was just her mind playing tricks, she sat up, swung her legs over the side of the bed, and padded quietly to the desk. She hesitated before picking up the picture. It looked the same. Same faded colors. Same two figures sitting on the pavilion. Same trees stretching high in the background. But the unease lingered. She glanced at the corkboard, where other old photos still hung. They all looked exactly as they should: school portraits, snapshots of birthdays, group photos from summer camps. Nothing out of place. Still gripping the photo, She moved toward the window and looked outside. The backyard was empty, bathed in the pale glow of early morning. The wind had settled. The swing on the porch was still. It was just a picture. Just a stupid childhood picture. She set it back down on the desk and climbed back into bed, forcing herself to shut her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. And when it did, her dreams were muddled, flashes of the park, the pavilion, the sound of distant laughter that faded as soon as she tried to hold on to it. By the time she woke again, the sun was high, and the unease from the night before felt distant, diluted by daylight. Downstairs, her mother was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter. "You were up early," she remarked without turning around. "I heard you moving around." Lena hesitated. "Yeah. Couldn't sleep." Her mother hummed in understanding, setting a cup of coffee in front of her. "That happens sometimes, coming back home after a long time. The past feels closer here, doesn't it?" Lena wrapped her hands around the mug, the warmth grounding her. "Yeah, it does." Her mother gave a small smile before sitting across from her. "I was thinking of heading into town later, if you want to come. It might be nice to get out for a bit." Lena nodded, taking a slow sip of her coffee. That sounded normal. That sounded good. But even as she focused on the ordinary rhythm of the morning, she couldn't shake the quiet sense that something just beneath the surface, had shifted. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if it was just in her head. Lena spent most of the afternoon walking through town with her mother. The familiarity of it all was both comforting and disorienting, like stepping into a version of her past that had been preserved just enough to be recognizable, but not enough to feel real. The bakery still smelled like cinnamon and butter, the bookstore still had the same uneven floorboards, and the town square was still dotted with the same aging benches where people lingered, talking about nothing in particular. But something about the place felt thinner. Like if she reached out too quickly, her hand might pass through it. She tried to shake the thought as they stopped at the grocery store, watching her mother pick through a display of apples. The air smelled of something faintly sweet and overripe. Lena found herself staring at the large wall of community bulletins near the entrance, missing pet flyers, local business ads, and an announcement about the upcoming summer fair. Then, tucked in the corner, she saw it. A faded flyer, curled at the edges, its ink smudged from years of being pinned and unpinned. At first, she thought it was just another notice that had been forgotten, but when she stepped closer, the words hit her like cold air. Missing, David Diddy Marshall. The photo was old. Much older than she expected. Black and white, grainy, like it had been photocopied too many times. She recognized the face instantly, Diddy's face, younger than in her memories, but unmistakable. The text below was barely legible, worn from time. Last seen. She moved closer, squinting, but the words blurred together. A hand touched her shoulder, light but sudden. Lena inhaled sharply, turning to see her mother looking at her with a small frown. "You okay?" Lena swallowed. "Yeah. She gestured toward the flyer, but when she turned back, it was gone. The space where it had been was empty, just a bare spot on the corkboard." She blinked. Had she imagined it? Her mother was still watching her, waiting for an answer. Lena forced a small nod. "Yeah. I'm fine." Her mother didn't press. just gave a quiet hum before nudging the grocery basket toward the checkout line. Lena followed, her fingers curling around the strap of her bag, suddenly unsure whether the afternoon light felt warm or just bright. By the time they left the store, the streets seemed quieter than before. The wind had picked up again, carrying the scent of rain, though the sky remained stubbornly clear. Lena didn't say anything, but as they walked back home, she found herself glancing over her shoulder. And for the first time in years, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just remembering Diddy. She was being reminded of him. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. The air in her room felt thick, the kind of heavy stillness that made it hard to breathe. The covers were too warm, the pillow too firm, the silence too deep. She turned onto her side, facing the desk where the photograph still sat. She hadn't touched it since that morning. But now, in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through her curtains, she swore the picture looked different. The pavilion in the background seemed darker, as if the trees had grown denser, swallowing the sky behind them. And her own face, something about it was wrong. She couldn't see her expression clearly, but the way her head tilted slightly forward, the way the shadows caught on her features, made her look unfamiliar. She sat up. Maybe she was just imagining things. Maybe exhaustion was making her mind twist simple details into something they weren't. But the feeling in her chest, the quiet, gnawing unease, told her otherwise. A soft creak echoed from the hallway. Lena froze. The old house was always settling, always shifting, but this was different. This wasn't the quiet groan of wood expanding or the wind rattling the eaves. This was footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. She turned toward the door, heart pounding. The gap beneath it was a sliver of darkness, unbroken, no light from the hallway, no shifting shadows. But she knew someone was there. A second creak. Closer. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She forced herself to move, to slide her feet silently onto the floor, careful not to make a sound. Every instinct screamed for her to stay still, to pretend she was asleep, to let whatever was on the other side of that door pass by. But it didn't pass. Another creak. This time, just outside. Lena clenched her jaw, her hands gripping the edge of the mattress. Her mind raced through possibilities. Her mother? No. She would have called out, knocked, made noise. This was different. A long, breathless moment stretched between her and the door. Then, knock. Not loud. Not hurried. Just a single, hollow tap against the wood. Lena's pulse pounded in her ears. She didn't move. Another knock. Slow. Expectant. The handle rattled. She sucked in a sharp breath, scrambling back against the headboard, pressing herself into the shadows. The door didn't open, but she could hear it now, breathing. Just beyond the wood. Low. Steady. Waiting. Lena sat frozen, her breath shallow, every muscle in her body locked in place. The sound beyond the door was unmistakable now, a slow, deliberate inhale, followed by an exhale that was just a fraction too long, too controlled. The air in the room felt colder. The shadows stretched deeper. The handle rattled again, harder this time. A quiet, almost testing movement. Then silence. The waiting was worse than the noise. Lena's fingers dug into the sheets. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the sharp edge of fear pressing against her ribs. The weight of something unseen settled over her, thick and suffocating. She tried to convince herself it was just her mind playing tricks on her. Maybe the wind. Maybe the old pipes shifting in the house. But the breath on the other side of the door didn't belong to the wind. She forced herself to move, inching off the bed as slowly as she could. The wooden floor felt ice cold beneath her bare feet. She had to be careful. Any noise, any shift in movement, and whatever was standing outside might know she was awake. The door creaked. Not the handle this time. The wood itself, as if something was leaning against it. Lena's stomach turned. A whisper. Faint, barely audible. But it was there. Her name. Drawn out like the remnants of a dream. Lena. Her throat clenched shut. It was wrong. The way it was spoken, familiar, but distorted, stretched like a voice forced through a space it didn't belong. Then, just as suddenly, the sound stopped. She waited, barely breathing, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, footsteps. Not retreating. Moving inside. Lena's chest seized. Her breath hitched as she realized, with sudden, sickening clarity, the door had never opened. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker, like the walls had shifted closer in the dark. Lena's breath came in short, uneven gasps, her back pressing against the nightstand as she tried to shrink into herself. She didn't understand. She hadn't heard the door open. She hadn't heard anything move. And yet, the floorboards groaned. Not outside. Inside. Lena's fingers tightened around the edge of the nightstand, her pulse thundering beneath her skin. The space between her and the door was small, but the room felt impossibly vast, like the dark corners had stretched, swallowing anything solid. Something was in here with her. She couldn't see it, but she felt it. A presence, not warm, not human, but something else. Something weightless yet suffocating, something that sent icy tendrils up her spine. It wasn't just the fear of being watched. It was the certainty that she was not alone. The air shifted. A slow, measured inhale. Lena. The whisper slithered through the darkness, curling into the space just beside her ear. It was close. Too close. She scrambled backward, knocking into the nightstand. The lamp wobbled, then toppled, crashing to the floor with a sharp burst of sound. The room was thrown into momentary chaos, shadows shifting violently, her own jagged breath filling the silence. Then, stillness. Lena pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, forcing herself not to make a sound. She strained her ears, desperate to hear something, anything, asterisk, but there was nothing, asterisk. No breathing. No movement. Just silence. But she knew better than to believe it was gone. Lena didn't dare move. The lamp lay shattered at her feet, shards of glass catching the faint sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtains. The silence that followed felt unnatural, pressing against her ears, stretching into something unbearable. Then, asterisk, a shift, asterisk. Not a sound, but a movement in the air itself, like something unseen had stirred just inches away. Her breath hitched. A shape loomed in the darkness. Not solid. Not quite real. A distortion in the air, bending the shadows around it, stretching them into something wrong. She couldn't see it clearly, but she could feel it, asterisk asterisk in absence, a hollow space where something should not be, asterisk asterisk. Lena clenched her jaw to stop the cry rising in her throat. She needed to move. Now. Her muscles screamed as she forced herself to inch toward the door, her bare feet careful to avoid the scattered glass. The air felt colder the closer she got, as if stepping through an invisible barrier into something ancient, something untouched by time. The whisper came again, curling through the air, soft and deliberate. "You remember me." Lena's stomach twisted. It was not a question. It was a statement. And something in the pit of her chest told her, asterisk asterisk, it was right, asterisk asterisk. Her fingers brushed the doorknob. Cold, too cold. She swallowed back the rising terror and turned it, expecting resistance, expecting something to grab her, to pull her back, but the door swung open. The hallway beyond was empty. Dark. Still. Lena's pulse pounded as she stumbled forward, her breath uneven, her body bracing for something, anything, to stop her. But nothing did. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Because deep in her bones, she knew if she turned around, she would see it. Lena's fingers hovered over the doorknob, her entire body trembling. The whisper on the other side was soft, desperate, Diddy's voice, asterisk asterisk, but younger, asterisk asterisk. "Help me." She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. But the sound of that voice, the way it cracked, the way it ached, dug into her chest like rusted hooks, pulling at something old, something buried. Her breathing hitched. The presence behind her had not moved. She could still feel it, hovering just at the edge of her awareness, stretching the air thin, warping the silence into something unbearable. And yet, it was waiting. Not forcing. Not stopping her. She swallowed hard. Her heart pounded so violently it felt like it might shake her apart. She turned the handle. The door swung open. Darkness. Not the kind found in an unlit room, asterisk asterisk, this was deeper, asterisk asterisk, a void, thick and endless, swallowing all traces of the house beyond. The hallway, the walls, asterisk asterisk, gone, asterisk asterisk, as if the doorway had become a wound in reality itself. And somewhere inside it, asterisk asterisk, Diddy, asterisk asterisk. A small figure stood just beyond the threshold, barely visible, barely real. His silhouette flickered, his form shifting between solid and shadow. Lena's chest clenched. His face, asterisk asterisk, wrong, asterisk asterisk. His body, asterisk asterisk, still, asterisk asterisk. But his mouth, torn into a silent scream. The voice had come from him, but his lips had never moved. "Lena." The whisper came from behind her. Eyes shot through her veins. Hands, cold, unseen, grasped her wrists. Not pulling her back. Pulling her in, Lena jerked back, but the hands held firm, asterisk asterisk, cold, clammy, wrong, asterisk asterisk, fingers like dead weight curled around her wrists, pressing into her skin with an unnatural stillness, as if they weren't gripping her, but claiming her. She gasped, twisting, struggling, but her limbs felt sluggish, like she was sinking into something unseen. The darkness beyond the doorway pulsed, stretching, pulling at the edges of the room. The air had weight now, thick and suffocating, pressing against her ribs, wrapping around her throat. Diddy stood motionless, just beyond the threshold. His body flickered, asterisk, a silhouette caught between worlds, between time, asterisk. His mouth still hung open in that silent scream. But the whisper behind her, asterisk, the thing that held her, was not silent, asterisk. You remember, don't you? Lena's stomach twisted. Something shifted behind her, asterisk, too close, too large, asterisk. She could feel it leaning in, feel the breath of something not breathing against the back of her neck. She squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't look. She couldn't. The fingers around her wrists tightened, a slow, deliberate pressure. Not pulling. Sinking. The floorboards beneath her feet softened. No, not softened, asterisk, vanished, asterisk. The house was disappearing. Or maybe she was. Come back, Lena. A whisper. A command. A memory. Diddy's shape wavered, closer now, though he hadn't moved. His dark, hollow eyes locked onto hers. And then he did move. Slow. Jerked. His mouth stretched, asterisk, too wide, too unnatural, asterisk. The silent scream cracked. Then a sound. Low. Twisting. Crawling up the walls, asterisk. Not a voice. Something else. Lena's scream ripped through the air, swallowed almost instantly by the thick, pressing darkness that surrounded her. The cold hands at her wrists tightened, not yanking, not pulling, asterisk, but anchoring, asterisk, holding her in place as if she were caught between two forces, one dragging her forward, the other keeping her from escaping. Diddy's figure stood just beyond the threshold, flickering like a dying bulb. His body remained motionless, unnatural, but something in the air around him twitched. The darkness behind him wasn't empty, it pulsed, stretched, moved like something inside it was breathing. And then, Diddy's head snapped. A sharp, unnatural jerk, his mouth widening further, his hollow eyes boring into her. The silent scream broke. A sound spilled out. Not a cry. Not a voice. Something else. Low at first, then rising, asterisk, a choked, rattling noise, asterisk. Like bones grinding together. Like air being forced through lungs that had long since forgotten how to breathe. The fingers around Lena's wrists tightened further. Her skin felt like it was freezing beneath them, numb, foreign, distant. She struggled again, jerking her body, but it was useless. She wasn't just being held, she was sinking. The wooden floor beneath her was gone. It looked like she was still in the house, still standing on solid ground, but she could feel it, a sensation spreading up her legs, like her body wasn't entirely there anymore. Like she was becoming part of something else. Lena. The whisper curled around her ear again, too close, too deep. Not Diddy. Something else. Something using his voice. She felt a presence just behind her, unseen but undeniable, towering, leaning, pressing against the edges of her sanity. It exhaled, a slow, controlled breath that sent a wave of ice crawling down her spine. You left me. She thrashed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her fingers dug into the wood of the doorframe, solid, real, She wasn't gone yet. Not yet. With a surge of desperation, she threw herself forward, wrenching her body with everything she had. The hand snapped away. Cold air rushed around her, and she fell, slamming onto the wooden floor of the hallway, gasping as pain jolted through her limbs. The second she hit the ground, the weight in the air shifted. The whispering stopped. Lena scrambled back, her hands clawing at the floorboards as she tried to push herself away from the doorway. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Diddy was still there. Standing just inside the dark void, his body rigid, his arms hanging unnaturally still. His head was tilted at an odd angle, his mouth still open in that horrible, gaping expression. His eyes, wide, empty, fixed on her, But he didn't move. The presence behind her, the one that had been whispering, was gone. Or no, not gone. Watching. Waiting. Lena didn't dare blink. Didn't dare move. The doorway between her and Diddy remained open, the darkness inside stretching and shifting as if it were alive. The air buzzed with something unspoken, unfinished. Then, Diddy's jaw moved. A sickening, wet crack as it stretched further, his lips peeling away from his teeth. And finally, his voice, You remember now. Lena's breath caught. Something inside her, something buried deep, lurched. Memories flickered. Flashes. A summer day. Laughter in the park. The pavilion. A dare. A fall. Cold water swallowing a scream. Her own hands, small, shaking, reaching, but not fast enough, And Diddy, drowning. Lena's body locked. She couldn't move. The darkness behind Diddy rippled, shifted. And for the first time, she realized it wasn't just a void. It wasn't empty. Something else was inside. Something that had him. And it wanted her too. Lena's breath came in ragged, uneven gasps as she sat frozen on the wooden floor. Her fingers pressed into the boards, grounding her, reminding her that she was still here, still real, but the air around her was different now. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was breathing. A faint, rhythmic pulse in the walls, in the floor, in the very air she swallowed. A slow inhale, then a pause, a deliberate, expectant stillness. Then, exhale, like something was waiting for her to speak. But she had no words. Her eyes stayed locked on Diddy, his small frame still flickering in and out of focus. The darkness behind him was shifting, stretching, pulling, His voice had been his, but not his. And yet, the memories, A lake. A summer afternoon. Diddy's laughter, high, wild, endless. Bet you won't jump. Her own voice, teasing, pushing. The splash. The silence. Lena's stomach twisted so violently she thought she might be sick. It had been an accident. She had tried. She had reached for him, but his fingers had slipped, asterisk, asterisk, too wet, too cold, asterisk, asterisk. And the water had taken him. She hadn't told, hadn't spoken, hadn't dared to look back. But now, asterisk, asterisk, Diddy was here, asterisk, asterisk. Or something wearing his shape. The room around her pressed in tighter, the doorway, the shadows, the unnatural weight in the air, it was all alive. Lena's chest heaved as she tried to crawl back further, her fingers scraping against the rough wood. A whisper. Low, curling, not from Diddy, but from the darkness itself. Asterisk, you left him. Asterisk, the voice came from everywhere. Lena shook her head violently. No, she choked out. No, I didn't. I tried, but even as she said it, something inside her shattered. Because she hadn't. Not really. She had stood there, frozen, staring at the water, waiting for him to come up. And when he hadn't, asterisk, asterisk, she had run, asterisk, asterisk. Diddy stepped forward. Not walked. Shifted. Like the space between them was not a distance, but a choice. His feet hovered slightly above the floor. His arms hung at his sides, limp, unnatural. His head was still tilted at that awful, broken angle. But his eyes, they were no longer empty. They were watching her. The whisper came again, curling against her ears, slipping beneath her skin. Asterisk, come with us. Asterisk, Lena's fingers clenched into fists. Something brushed against her ankle. Cold. Not a hand. Something else. A pull. A slow, insistent tug. She sucked in a sharp breath and jerked away, scrambling to her feet. Diddy's face twisted. Not a frown. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. You're still afraid, he whispered. And then the house groaned. A deep, aching sound, like the very bones of it were shifting beneath her feet. The floor tilted. The air thickened. Lena stumbled, her body dragged backward toward the door, toward the thing that waited beyond it. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She dug her nails into the wall, desperate, shaking. Diddy, she gasped. Please. His form shuddered. For the first time, his lips moved, not just to speak, but to tremble. Like something inside him was still fighting. His hand twitched. For a brief, impossible moment, she saw him as he had been, asterisk, asterisk, a boy, her friend, terrified, reaching out for help, asterisk, asterisk. The way he had reached for her that day. Lena's breath hitched. She lunged forward. Her fingers caught his wrist, asterisk, asterisk, cold, too cold, but real, asterisk, asterisk. The darkness behind him screamed. A soundless, consuming rage. And then, the world cracked open. Lena's grip on Diddy's wrist tightened, her fingers digging into the unnatural cold of his skin. It felt wrong, like touching something that no longer belonged in this world. A shiver ran up her spine, but she didn't let go. She couldn't. The darkness behind him seethed. A deep, guttural sound rumbled through the air, not from Diddy, not from the house, asterisk, asterisk, from the thing inside it, asterisk, asterisk, the force that had been whispering, pulling, watching. The thing that had him. The walls trembled. The floor beneath her breathed. Lena's pulse pounded as she pulled harder. Diddy didn't resist. His body wavered, flickering in and out of focus like static on an old screen. His face was still twisted, still frozen in that awful expression of grief, of something unfinished, but his fingers twitched. A step forward. The shadows screamed. Not with sound, but with pressure, with something unseen pushing against her chest, against her limbs, trying to pry her away. The cold wrapped around her wrists, her legs, her ribs, asterisk, pulling her backward, deeper, into whatever was waiting beyond the doorway, asterisk. Diddy's fingers curled slightly around hers. A silent plea. Help me. Lena braced her feet, every muscle in her body burning. Come on, she gasped. Come back. The darkness lurched. Something lashed out from inside it, not hands, not anything she could see, but a force, a hunger. It grabbed her. Her breath ripped from her lungs as an invisible weight clamped around her chest, crushing, suffocating. It didn't want her to take him. It wanted her. The house twisted. The air around her cracked, groaned, bent. Her grip on Diddy's wrist started to slip. No, she wouldn't let go. Not this time. With every ounce of strength left in her, Lena yanked him forward. Diddy's body jerked free. The darkness behind him shrieked. For a split second, Lena saw it, asterisk, not in the way you see things, but in the way you feel them, asterisk. A shape. A hunger. A thing that had no face but too many eyes. And it was furious. A gust of freezing air slammed into her, knocking her off her feet. She and Diddy collapsed onto the wooden floor, gasping. The doorway, asterisk, the wound in reality itself, began to close, asterisk. The thing tried to reach through. But Diddy was out. And Lena was still here. The shadows shrieked one last time, then vanished. The air snapped. The house settled. Silence. Lena lay on the cold floor, her chest heaving, her entire body trembling. The pressure in the room had lifted, but something lingered. She turned her head. Diddy lay beside her. Still. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, asterisk, he blinked, asterisk. His mouth opened. Lena? His voice was small. Real. Lena felt something break inside her. She let out a breath, asterisk, shaky, ragged, relieved, asterisk. And finally, she let go. Lena lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, her body still trembling from the cold that had sunk deep into her bones. Her breath came in slow, ragged gasps, her heartbeat still too loud, too fast. The house was silent now. The walls no longer pulsed. The air no longer whispered. It was over. Diddy was beside her, his small chest rising and falling, his skin no longer flickering like a fading memory. He was solid now. Real, asterisk, but he didn't move much, just lay there staring at the ceiling like she was, as if neither of them could fully believe they had made it back. Lena turned her head toward him. Diddy? He blinked once, slowly. His lips parted, but at first, nothing came out. Then, in a voice so small it barely reached her ears, "You came back." Lena swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I should have done it sooner," she whispered. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. His eyes weren't empty anymore. They were filled with something deep, unreadable, like he had been waiting a very, very long time for this moment. A shiver ran down her spine. She sat up slowly, her muscles aching, her hands still unsteady. The floor beneath her felt stable again, solid. The darkness that had nearly swallowed her was gone. The doorway where it had existed was just a door now. But the house still didn't feel the same. Diddy sat up too, slower than her. He looked around, taking in the space as if he barely recognized it. His fingers brushed against the floor, his touch hesitant, cautious. "How long?" Lena's voice faltered. She didn't know how to ask it. Diddy's gaze dropped to his hands. "A long time," he said softly. Something inside her twisted. The air in the room felt too still. She licked her lips, her mouth dry. "But you're back now," she said, forcing the words out, hoping they sounded right. Diddy hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. Lena exhaled, rubbing her hands over her face. She wanted to cry. She wanted to collapse. But most of all, she wanted to leave. She pushed herself onto shaky legs, offering a hand to Diddy. He stared at it for a long moment before finally taking it. His fingers were warm now. That should have comforted her. It didn't. They walked through the house together, moving carefully, quietly, as if afraid the walls might still be listening. But nothing stopped them. The air remained still. The house let them go. Lena opened the front door, stepping outside first, breathing in the crisp night air like it was the first real breath she'd taken in years. She turned back. Diddy stood in the doorway, hovering just past the threshold. Something about the way he hesitated made her stomach tighten. "You coming?" she asked, her voice careful. Diddy looked at her, then past her, then at the sky, as if he hadn't seen it in a long, long time. Then he smiled. It wasn't the smile she remembered. It was too small, too knowing. He stepped outside. The moment his foot touched the earth, the house behind him shuddered. Lena flinched. For just a second, asterisk, just one, asterisk, she thought she saw movement in the windows, shadows curling away, retreating, disappearing into the walls. And then, silence. Diddy looked up at her, blinking slowly. "It's gone now," he said softly. Lena forced herself to nod. "Yeah." But something in her chest didn't feel right. Something was off. Diddy turned his gaze toward the road, toward the distant streetlights beyond the driveway. Then he started walking. Lena frowned. "Wait, where are you going?" Diddy didn't answer. He just kept walking. She hesitated, then hurried after him. "Diddy, where?" And then he stopped. Lena did too. Her breath caught. Because the streetlights didn't reach him. Where he stood, asterisk, just past the driveway, just past the edge of the yard, asterisk, the darkness remained. Like it was following him. Her hands clenched. "Diddy?" He turned, slowly, looking at her over his shoulder. And smiled again. Lena's pulse slammed against her ribs. Because this time, his eyes were empty again. Lena's breath hitched in her throat. She had seen that look before. Hollow. Unfinished, asterisk. Like something that had almost come back but never fully left. Diddy stood just past the driveway, where the streetlights refused to touch him. The glow of the lamps flickered as if struggling to reach him, as if the air around him were still tainted by something else. The night was silent. Too silent. Lena stepped forward instinctively, reaching out, but she hesitated. Her fingers trembled in the cold night air. Diddy tilted his head, his expression almost curious. "You're scared of me," he said softly. Lena's throat tightened. "No," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was lying. Diddy blinked slowly, studying her like he was waiting for something. "You don't have to be," he murmured. The street behind him stretched into the darkness, endless and quiet, the way it had always been when she was a child. But now it felt different. Like it wasn't really there at all. Like if he kept walking, she would never see him again. A sharp, twisting ache bloomed in her chest. He had been gone for so long. She had lost him once. She couldn't let that happen again. Lena forced herself to step forward, closing the space between them. "Diddy, you don't have to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Diddy smiled at her. A small, knowing smile. "I already did," he said. Her stomach twisted. Diddy lifted a hand, slow, careful, and touched her wrist. The warmth of his skin sent a wave of cold through her body. Not because he was freezing. Because he wasn't. His warmth was wrong. It didn't feel like the warmth of something living. It felt like something that had learned to mimic life. Her pulse quickened. Diddy's fingers tightened slightly. "You brought me back," he said. "Didn't you?" Lena swallowed, a horrible weight pressing into her ribs. The wind shifted. For the first time since stepping outside, she realized the house was watching. Not physically. Not in any way she could see. But it had not let them go. Not completely. Lena turned, looking at the house, the old, familiar walls, the windows that reflected nothing but empty black. The doorway was still open. The air inside was wrong. She had felt relief when they escaped. But what if they hadn't? Diddy took a step closer, still holding her wrist. His eyes studied her, his expression unreadable. "You're remembering now, aren't you?" Lena's chest seized. She was remembering too much. The whispers. The voice that had come from nowhere. The thing in the dark. It had held Diddy for so long. Had it really let go? Had it really given him back? Her breath caught in her throat. Diddy's fingers tightened. The street light behind him flickered. For just a second, just one, his shadow stretched the wrong way. Not toward the light. Toward her. Lena's pulse slammed. She tried to pull back. Diddy's grip hardened. The warmth of his skin began to burn. "You wouldn't leave me again," he said, his voice soft, softer than it should be. Lena's breath hitched. The streetlights flickered. The wind died. The darkness at the edge of the road seemed to pulse. like something waiting. Lena's nails dug into the flesh of her palm. No, this wasn't right. She wrenched her hand away. Diddy's expression didn't change. Not anger. Not pain. Just asterisk, knowing, asterisk. She staggered back, her pulse hammering, her breath coming too fast, too shallow. Diddy didn't move, but his shadow did. Long twisting, reaching. Lena took another step back. Diddy blinked. The house behind her groaned. The wind roared back to life. And then Diddy smiled again. See you soon, Lena. Her stomach dropped. Before she could speak, asterisk, before she could do anything, asterisk, Diddy stepped backward and disappeared into the dark.